Russell Wilson is back out here on his bullshit. Did you guys see the report about Russell Wilson on their flight over to London for their game? Apparently he chronicled his timeline of the flight where he mentioned hours watching film, hours doing PT, including doing high knees in the aisle of the plane while his teammates slept, crashing for a little bit, and then watching more film. Dad, in your 9 years in the NFL, did you ever see anybody attempt to do a high knee or a calisthenic in the aisle of an airplane?
So I'll say this. You know the guys I played with in Philly, Mike, a lot of A personalities. If anybody did that on a plane, and we went to England in the preseason when I was in Philly. Those were just preseason games then. If anybody got up and did that for the amount of time Russell said he did it, there are guys on our team that would have beat the shit out of that person. I mean, just would have knocked him, blindsided him going down. And I don't know. Does Russell think he gets extra points in the afterlife for trying to be the perfect human being? I have no idea. But I mean, we all shake our heads. I can't imagine the biting of tongues that has to go on in that locker room. Because at least in Seattle, they got used to it, right? Because he was there for so long, and for other guys that are there for so long.
And they were good when he was doing it.
Exactly. When you're winning, you can kind of, laugh that stuff off. But when you're not, and you know of someone, but don't know them, and then see some of their actions, you're going, what the hell are you doing? And then to chronicle all that, to make sure it gets out there. What I did, and after I watched more film, I did sleep for an hour, It's like, oh, my God. Yeah, it gets a little sickening.
While everyone else was knocked out while he was doing his 3 hours of high knees in the aisles. That's what I didn't like about it, is that he didn't overtly barb his other players, but in him trying to get out there exactly what he's done to be ready for this game in London and to take the reins back on this offense, he kind of threw his guys under the bus.
Yeah,
he said, "I'm getting treatment. I'm doing high knees." Everybody was knocked out. Everybody's just knocked out sleeping.
Sleep. Brett Ripien, sleep. You see him out here doing this shit? Nope.
And because what's wild is I juxtapose that with going through Instagram and all that and seeing old video of Kobe Bryant. Now, Kobe Bryant would tell you how much he's working, but when Kobe Bryant says it, you kind of look at it like, that dude's crazy. That dude, he's saying you could get up and work out twice a day, or you could get up and work out 4 times a day, and over the years, that 4 times a day is going to put you further. I mean, he explains it, but when he says it, I'm like, yeah. When Russell does it, I'm like, oh, God, give me a break. Quit trying to sound so perfect. Kobe, and I've seen more of it lately with Kobe of talking about, and other players talking about Kobe's work ethic. That's something you don't hear. You don't hear other players talking about Russell Wilson's work ethic. It's only Russell Wilson talking about Russell Wilson's work ethic.
Yeah, I think that's among the differences, right? The Russell Wilson conversation has gotten really complicated, and some people have taken it too far and used it to slander Russ as his all-time legacy as a player, which has plenty of good parts to it.
Yes,
the work ethic is something he is well known for. The guy cares a lot about football, but Dad, you said it. It's the fact that you need everyone to know how much you care about it at this point. And it really just goes along with the perception of Russ, because you talked about Kobe Bryant. And while Kobe was a guy that a lot of people thought was trying to Kobe was a guy caught between worlds based on the way that he was brought up, where he grew up, where he was born, all these things. He was a guy that never, when you hear people and read people talk about him, guy that never really felt like he had one home necessarily. And so some people thought he was trying to burrow that through it. But it ended up working. That ended up being the public persona that was created for him. Russ has been about branding. Russ has been about looking like you are presenting the perfect image at all time. And that's something that I think in this day and age, when people get so much exposure and you're seen so many places and the advertisements and you're as good and out and in front of things and the Sierra factor, when you're so many places at once, eventually people want to not be talked to like you're a football eating robot. Eventually that wears off for some people. Like Tom Brady, say what you will about him, aged sort of gracefully into his time in Tampa, where we at least felt like we were getting getting a little bit more of the real Tom Brady for a while. It may have been calculated, but man, it was done well enough to where you started to look at it and say, oh, this is a guy who's letting his hair down a little bit, and we're seeing a little bit more of drunk Tom and all that shit.
Yeah, well, I think him getting out of New England helped that as well, because you weren't telling a lot of those stories there. And part of it, though, with Russell, now Russell's been around a long time. You and I had this conversation over the Drew Brees stuff in the locker room when I kind of were jumping on his teammates who were getting on him on Twitter, and you were like, and you correctly pointed out, Dad, this is kind of how it's done today, putting things out there. So it just happens so much with Russell. I get a little tired of it. But like guys that put out workout videos, I don't understand that either. Why do you? And again, this is me coming from a different era where I'm like, why are you doing that? But then it does come back to Mike on that show, and you said this is what guys do now. Guys like to put that stuff out publicly, and maybe there's a different reason. Maybe it is branding. But I was always like, you go work. Why do you have to let everybody know that you worked? I guess I've always kind of been of that mind.
Were you talking about Russ putting this stuff out there, or were you talking about his teammates' desire to badmouth him?
No, I'm talking about even other guys that put their workout videos out there.
Okay.
We're in the day and age where you put everything out. 3 a.m, I'm working out, and I would look at that and say, who gives a shit? You know what? I know you're working out, but again, I go back to our conversation on air where, and I have to understand, this is kind of the times where people like to see that or expect to see that, or maybe that's expected to put out there. It's something in my era that obviously was never done. There was never an avenue to do it unless you brought a TV crew there from one of the local stations and said, film me, doing 40s. You couldn't do it. So I have to kind of even step back a little bit and say, okay, this is kind of where we are now, even though I still don't really understand why you do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of it's the self-promotion part, because there's money attached to it now for so many of these guys. As they create that, branding is kind of a dirty word, but it is what it is. And for some of these guys, it can become pretty lucrative. And so that I think I've sort of become numb to, just because, like you said, we're used to it everywhere now. We got to talk to Set Free Richardson, who was a part of the And One mixtape phenomenon that went on.
Right.
And the one thing we talked about is now every kid coming up in high school basketball has a highlight mix that's cut to a song. Every player that's committing out of high school for football has all these different things that go along with their recruitment. Pictures in the jerseys, all the stuff you do on campus that's just changed. It's the Red Queen rat race to keep having to up the ante to really get to the same end line here, which is wild to watch, because even for me and Brandon, who are 10 years out of our time in college football, it's a totally different ecosystem now. Yeah. So that part of it's always going to feel like it's changing.
But you don't see that from everyone, and that's what I think is the issue, and that's why people like Kyle Brandt is coming at Russell Wilson's authenticity, because he's got a lot of people in his ear telling him, "Hey, you should do this," and it seems like Russell's like, "Okay, as long as he can." He has all the elements to execute certain things. But what I want to talk about, though, is good artists borrow, great artists steal, and shout out to Stu Gatz. They brought up on Le Batard, can Russell Wilson play his way out of the Hall of Fame?
Oh, no.
Because that's currently what he's out there doing.
I don't think so. I think he's done enough good that it would, if that were to happen, it would take a while. I mean, I don't know how much longer we expect him to play. I mean, I know he signed the extension, but that doesn't mean he's playing all of that. I would find it hard to believe that he could, in all honesty. So I would say no.
Yeah,
the guy said no one's ever done it.
And it would be Hall of Fame worthy to find a way to play your way out of the Hall of Fame. Like, to have that simultaneously bad of an end to your career after how good the start of your career was would be fascinating. So Russell Wilson clearly willing to put in the work to do that, by the way, if it comes down to it. We know he'll be doing the high knees and the plane necessary for that.
Oh, my God.
Go.